The equation is power equals attention times depth times efficiency. I think it's important because, well, first of all, let me apologize for putting everything into an equation. I used to be a math teacher in the Peace Corps and studied engineering, and it just seems that even fuzzy things like the way we teach and what we should teach can be quantified in some way. So as I was thinking about why it is that it's hard to get good games into classroom situations, I was thinking about that and trying to figure out what are the variables involved there, and that's when the equation came to me. It actually came to me in the shower, and I've been thinking about it for a while, and sort of wrapped it up today, just before the presentation, to come up with the final slide. Well, it starts with attention, as does learning. I mean, if you don't have people's attention, then nothing else happens after that point. So the first thing to think about is what is it that is a source of attention? Why is it that when people listen to us or look at us or think about what we're saying, what causes that? And actually that has very little to do with technology. It has to do with a lot of the things that we do as humans in front of a room with a class. But I think one of the reasons that games are popular, or at least thought about as an educational tool, is that they do very well the act of getting the attention of the player, and so do good teachers. So the first part of the equation is really thinking about to what extent do we have the full attention of the participant, whether they're a game player or a learner. And to quantify that, I think about brain minutes. I think about in the course of an hour. How many minutes, what portion of that hour are the learner's brains engaged in what we're talking about? And that's a ratio from 0 to 1. The next part of the equation is depth, because, and here again is where there's a kind of disconnect between what we need to do in schools sometimes and games. Depth, I'll give it a number from 0 to 100 to reflect the amount of processing that's required by the learner, by the listener, by the player. With 100 being those things that involve ethical decision making and synthesis and judgment and problem solving, and 0 or close to 0 being things that are just factual recall, the things at the bottom of Bloom's taxonomy. So a lot of the games that are being suggested as useful and the things that are most easily adopted by teachers are things that are really low-level drill and practice, flashy things. And there's certainly a use for those. I remember Math Blasters and a lot of the games that my son played when he was at the right age for those things, and they worked and they were good, but they were minimal depth, so it's a low number in there, somewhere down in the 20s, let's say. Last part is efficiency, and by that I mean really curricular efficiency. To what extent of the brain minutes, what ratio, what proportion of the brain minutes that are being spent have to do with the content that you're trying to teach or the skills you're trying to develop, versus what it takes to get through the game. If you think about, for example, war games, the board games that replicate battles of this, ancient times and so on, you have to spend an enormous amount of time just figuring out how to play the game. And that's not instructionally useful in most cases. And that's why those are hard to justify in a school situation. So you want to sort of tease out the part of it in which kids are actually thinking about history or math or whatever it is that you're trying to teach, and express that as a proportion as well. So somewhere between 0 and 1. So if you put it all together, it's at best a 1 in terms of attention, at best 100 in terms of the depth when we're grappling with large issues, and at best a 1 again for something that's all about the content and not about the game itself. So 100 is a perfect score. And I think if you take that equation and look at what we do in schools, particularly game-like or other kinds of activities, you'll find that some of the things we do are less worth doing than you might think about. You might think they are because of the time, the divergent time that's sort of diluted and put off into these other things that have nothing to do with learning. This equation really reflects the way I've been looking at games for a long time. I've just sort of formalized it by putting it into this equation. But this is the way when I look at games myself now, and I look at things that I think about integrating into my own teaching, and I make sort of semi-conscious decisions on whether something is worth doing or not. And it's largely a function of this equation, I think, which now I can give a name to and put numbers on.